Going through the story, we're into chapter 10 of the story, and blessing was meant to be the distinguishing mark of the people of God at this point. God's covenant with Israel required this obedience, but it always required obedience knowing that the blessing was going to be the reward. Yet this period of Judges is anything but that. When we read this, we don't feel that. This time of obedience and blessing was not coming to Israel. And more fitting descriptions, and this comes from a different commentary, are other B words, because that's what commentaries and preachers do. They got to run with that theme, are barren, blindness, battles, and bereavement. I had to say that very slow. I jacked that up many, many times. But battles, blindness, barren, and bereavement, all bad stuff. Not the blessings that we thought we would have. The truth is, blessings seemed very hard to come by in those days, and the reason why, lacking the obedience. God's people, His anointed people, abandoned Him. They walked away from Him. They chose other than Him. They turned from Him. And we see that directly in the end of the text of Judges. I know I'm kind of bouncing ahead, but I think it's very fitting as we start because it ends with, everyone did as they saw fit. I'm going to let that sink in because we can read something quickly and not really realize the devastation of the words. But everyone did as they saw fit. They did whatever they wanted. They was always the key word, this total regard for who they were, their title given to them by God Himself, God's people, His blessed nation. And they chose anarchy from God. I'm not sure there are more tragic words, but especially since we know what they meant by those words. They're hard to come by. This complete absence of anything to do with God. What a horrible text. What a horrible last sentence there. May we never, ever have those words to define us. And scary, sometimes they do. They describe me. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and there's a lot of things that happened during that generation to be proud of, but one that wasn't was this age of this horrible, predictable horror movie. And I know there was ones before that, but I really feel like my generation kind of cornered that market. We had the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I know that was a little bit before. We had Freddy Krueger. We had Jason in the Friday the 13th movie. You want some horrible, predictable horror movies, and we had that cornered. We had these horrible, horrible, horrible movies. And the one thing that always stood out is that word predictable. It wasn't like we were going to go to the movies and be blown away. Everyone knew what was coming. We may still jump, we may still be surprised, but it's like, they're right there. They're going to be right there. They're right there, and then they're right there, and we jump. But it's predictable. There's no moment of great surprise. No one left the theater thinking, wow, what had transpired in that movie. No, we knew exactly what to expect. And we would sit there yelling, right? We'd yell at the screen if you got into those movies, what are you doing? Why are you going in there? Don't walk. This is when you run. We want you to do all this, and we want them to do it, but they're not doing it. Don't go into the basement. Why do you go to the basement? You can't get out of the basement. Nobody gets out of the basement. And then the next thing, we're going to go get in the car. What's going to happen? It's not going to start. We still are ingrained. We know that this is what's going to happen. It always happens this way. There's even a commercial put out a few years ago. No, let's go to the barn and hide behind the axes. It's like, come on, the predictable nature. Even more tragic is how God's people chose over and over to reject God's good and perfect will. A promised blessing. And we sit here and we think, what are you doing? Why? You are the blessed people of God. You've been through so much. Come on, don't do it again. But a few remembered God's command. And one of those we were introduced to in this story, and her name was Hannah. Hannah, what we would call, was a pretty horrible life. And it's even hard, I didn't study much of Hannah before now. And even studying her, my heart sinks for Hannah. One, her life didn't show much promise. Her circumstances that surrounded her, that her life had, were horrible. Hannah knew loss. She knew hurt. She knew mental anguish. Many of us could say we have the same feelings. Hannah's story may speak to us. The ending of Hannah's story hopefully speaks to us. We know from the text that Hannah had long endured the grief of being barren. She could not have children. And that's horrible in itself, but you add to it that her husband had another wife who had given her husband children and reminded Hannah every day of what she could not do, mocking her. And that's all Hannah wanted. She wanted a child. One can only imagine the horrible existence that Hannah had. And I say imagine because, like I said, I could not even come close to even in text trying to figure out how to show that, example that, because I couldn't imagine that. Hannah's story may speak to you today, and I pray that the ending of her story does. Hannah's story is one of triumph. Triumph over her emotions, triumph over her lacking self-image. Her story would give great hope for those who live in an existence that they feel isn't good. And it sure isn't like those around her that she thinks are blessed because they have what she doesn't. But we know more about Hannah, and that's where we get to the blessing. We know that through all of this, frequently she went to the Lord in prayer. Frequently she worshiped. We know that she was close to God in all the devastation and all the horrible things that were going on. And that says a whole lot about who she is. I don't know if I could have been that strong. And Hannah is a story of strength. I can imagine that Hannah would go to the Lord. She would go to the temple to pray out of this true admiration for who God was, pouring out her heart to who God was. But I could also imagine she would go in anger and in confusion. And she would go to God in doubt. On one of her visits to worship at God's house, Eli, the high priest, is there. And it's kind of a crazy interaction because Hannah's there praying and Eli is looking at her, and the biblical response we have is Eli looks at her like she's drunk. He doesn't even recognize this passionate prayer, this hurting woman. He thinks she's drunk. That actually says a whole lot in a few simple words. Hannah was overwhelmed that day in prayer. She was praying with so much emotion that the words couldn't even come out. There was no sound. Just her and her response. She was pouring out of her heart in this desperate prayer. And then she turned to Eli. And she poured her heart out to Eli. And she vowed that day. She vows that day that if she was to have a child. And remember, this is a child that she's praying for that by earthly means she cannot have. This is a child that's not going to come. She's barren. But she vows to Eli that day, and she said, if God gives me a child, this child will be devoted to God, will be devoted to you, Eli, all the days of his life. And it's amazing because at this point, Hannah believes that God can do the impossible. And that's a great triumph in Hannah. And Eli's response, he assured her that a prayer would be heard. Wow. I don't know if you've ever been put in a hard situation where you needed to pray and you didn't know how to pray, you didn't know what to pray for. But in this instance, I don't know how I would pray, other than just peace and to console. But I hate to be put on the spot where you don't want to give too much hope, but you also don't want to be so glum. I mean, what would you say? How would you pray? But Eli has great faith also. Faith is something that would come from this. God did give Hannah a child, and that's of great amazement. He gave her, and that child did exactly what she said she would do with that child. That child was devoted to God. And as cool as it gets in Scripture, she names that child Samuel. Samuel, which means, of course, God heard. There's the blessing. And she took him every day to worship in that tabernacle, to worship and serve under Eli. Samuel grew to be a very blessed young man. We know a little bit more about that story. But he also grew as a blessed man because he had a mother that honored and followed and believed in God. when it seemed like nothing else was working and going good in her life and in her world. You know, some years later, God spoke to Hannah's son Samuel. One night when he was still a boy, God told Samuel that Eli, the high priest, the high priest that he was serving under, the high priest that his mother had devoted herself to earlier before he was born, that Eli, and his sons would be judged. And Samuel had to go and give this message. You know, I could not imagine once again giving that message to Eli, to say that you and your sons will fall, that God is bringing your reign to an end. It had to be pretty crushing for Eli to hear those words. And it has to be pretty crushing for Samuel to have to deliver those words. You know, God's word did come true, and this time an ending of Eli and his family's reign at the hands of the Philistines. Israel lost their first battle to the Philistines as course as any man would do. The men came back from battle and they blamed. They blamed the loss on whatever they could blame it on, but of course this time it was because, we forgot the ark. We can't go to battle without the ark. We have to have the ark in battle. If we would have had the ark that day, we would have won that battle. It wasn't like they had sought after God before the battle. They had wondered they would have brought it to him in blessing before it. It wasn't like they were giving God any part of this battle. This battle was for them. No, they figured they lost because they forgot this vessel. That's why they lost. But sadly, we know, like the 80s movie, they were wrong. They missed the point entirely of what they were missing. They faced the Philistine army again, but this time they did have their good luck charm. They had brought it to battle with them as they thought, this is what we'll do, this is what we'll take. God will bring us about, He will bring us forward. We have the ark with us. They lost many men, and in the process, they also lost Eli's 2 sons. And even worse than that, the Ark of the Covenant was also taken. What devastation. Where's the blessing? And now they have to return home and they have to report back to Eli what has happened. And we know at this time that Eli had grown very old. The text said that he was blind. And upon hearing the devastation news of the defeat, and then hearing the devastation news of his 2 sons' death, and then as soon as he heard the words of the Ark of the Covenant being lost, Eli falls dead. Right there on the spot. All this time, all this devastation, and God just wants to bless His people. But there's no obedience. So let's fast forward. Samuel now has taken Eli's place after he had died. But the Israelites were dissatisfied. They didn't like the reign that they were going on. They didn't like the idea of the judges. They didn't like what God was doing, and they started to demand a king. And why would you demand a king? Well, because everybody else had a king, and they seem to be thriving. So if they are doing good, and we may not think that's all that bad. I mean, it's just a rule, one way or the other. But it was truly the fact that they just didn't want to do what God had given to them, the plan for them. It was just another way of not doing what God had planned out for them. They wanted a king because everybody else had a king. Sound familiar? That's me also. Sometimes God doesn't fit. It costs too much. It's unrealistic. It's old. It's outdated. Don't feel bad. Me too. God, faith, doing good, moral compasses, those things aren't working, so why not try something different? Because if they look happy, obviously they got it figured out, and we jump off of what we know is right and we know is true. But Samuel knew better. Samuel goes to them and expresses his opposition. But God already knew that they had rejected him. God always knows when man plays games with him. Israel only knew they wanted to be like their pagan neighbors. The grass was greener. Oh, the dangers of wanting to be someone else. There's so many little mini sermons in this story, but man, that one's a hard one. to look at someone else and say, that's what we need to do, neglecting what we know is right and good. God warned the people. This is even the sad moment. This is the 80s movie all over again. God comes to them and warns them how costly this is going to be. To rule under a king, he said it would exploit them. That's a word we don't like. Nobody in here wants to be exploited. He said, you know what? It would be so bad it would be to the point of slavery. You would think that would be warning enough. This predictable horror movie said before you, don't do this. God himself saying not to do this. And they did it. The people ignored God's warning and they insisted on a king. And Saul was anointed king. And it actually began well. Samuel anointed him as king, and he was affirmed in miraculous signs by God as king. He fought the Amorites. He gave God the glory in that victory. Saul reminded the people that God had not rejected them. He was there. Even though they had turned away, he was there. He encouraged them again to follow God and serve him with their heart. God affirmed God's words, this time with rain. During a harvest of great need, God is there blessing. But Saul's honeymoon, of course, we know, was short-lived. During the battle of the Philistines, Saul gets nervous. Saul gets afraid. And Saul decides to take matters into his own hands. And he forgets the blessing. He forgets the obedient side of God. And in this instance, he forgot about the offerings and the rules that God had set forth. And Saul violates the very rule that only the priest would deal with the offerings. But Saul takes that into his own hands, thinking that's not a big deal. And of course it was. Well, Samuel returns and he confronts Saul about what has happened. And of course, once again, we see human nature as Saul backpedals, as he starts to make excuses. He tries to justify the sin that he has created. He does everything possible to get out of the situation. Sound familiar? Me too. Saul's path of half-hearted obedience and fear-based leadership of his years grew and grew and grew, and finally God rejects Saul. And here's the awesome part we so often forget. Through all this, God is still working for the good of mankind. God is still blessing, and he's trying so hard to get mankind to see and return. The same people that left him, that turned their backs to him, God is still blessing them and providing for them. God has already chosen a man, this unlikely king, this shepherd boy that one day would become the successor. A man that through triumphs and a man of great failure knew the blessing of God. A man that would point God's people back to him, and this time to him through Jesus. So chapter 10 is truly, we've been able to find some different strengths, and we've been able to see the weaknesses, and we've seen the lack of humanity when God knows what is good and wants to bless, and we can see the exact same thing in our own lives. And it's hard sometimes because it's easier when we're talking to somebody else, because it's like that 80s movie. Come on, don't do it. And God is there blessing anyway and doing everything possible. Hopefully the successes and failures are learning points for us through Hannah and Saul and Samuel. Hopefully their lives that are real to us and not felt Bible stories we put up and forget about. They're our history. Hopefully we can find ways to overcome the pressures of wanting to be somebody else. Hopefully we can live following God's laws only for our lives, even when they don't make any sense. Living for him no matter what the other side has to offer, because Satan is so good at selling. And when it comes to those times where Satan himself will try to tear you down, he will try to take you out. He will make you feel alone and broken. But he'll bring up the mocker around you. and eat at your weaknesses. Know that God does not give up, and know that God is blessing. You may not feel it, you may not know it, but believe it. When others turned on him, God stayed. When others mocked, he calmed. When others replaced, he stood. That's who God is. Our God is a God of second and third chances. Our God is a God of forgiveness and a God of hope. And above all, our God is a God of love. A love that makes absolutely no understanding. A God that wants to, no matter what, give blessings to his people. This day, I guarantee you, your life may not be great. You may be struggling. You may be hurting. And God is there and he's saying, I know. Let me bless you. In any way, shape, or form, let me bless you. Follow me, come to me, whatever you need, let me bless you. That is our God. Above all, he loves. When it makes absolutely no sense, he loves. When there's nobody else to talk to and the words aren't coming out and our emotions are flowing over, he hears. Where others may think, well, you're crazy. That's the obedience. You know, as we close, this is going to be a little bit longer closing than normal because I want to tell you about something that is starting that's a little bit different than what we're used to. What we normally do during our invitation time. This morning, some of our elders and deacons and their wives are going to be in the back, on the sides possibly. And they're there because they're standing there for you. At the invitation song, if you feel the need to come forward, we want you to come forward. If you feel the need to come forward and confess your sins, to be immersed in the waters of baptism, to be heard in front of the congregation, to be prayed with, we want you to do that. But maybe you're sitting there and you're standing there and you feel this urge for prayer, just a quick prayer. Or maybe just the opportunity to go talk to an elder or a deacon and their wives and just say, hey, this is going on, and I just need whatever, fill in the blank. This is a great opportunity to be able to pull somebody aside and just have that moment. Sometimes it's so hard to walk up here in front, that walk of shame, that feeling, and it's horrible because that's not what it is. It's a celebration. It's a walk of celebration. But that often gets lost because Satan throws that celebration into anxiety. And we know that may be hard, and we want to make sure that you know that there are others that are out there that are ready and waiting to do and to serve you in any way that you can. The one thing I want to make sure you know is don't overthink it. I know that sounds weird, but if God is wanting you, he's pushing you today to go back or front. If he's saying to you, why don't you go talk? Or just go pray. Don't overthink that. Believe that the Spirit of God inside of you may want and need and be pushing you today. So if there's anything we can do for you today, we want to do that. We would love to do that. In any way, shape, or form, if it's in prayer, if it's in baptism, if it's in a hug or in a conversation, we would love to do that for you today. If there's anything we can do for you today, we'd ask you to stand now as we sing.